Hi everyone, welcome to the new video series on syntax. This series is for spring of 2022. It's going to be using the 4th edition of Kearney's textbook. And again, this is for students at SIU, but I'm also making it available for everyone who might be interested. This is very similar to the previous series that I did before in spring 2020. That picked up, thanks to the COVID pandemic, about halfway through the semester. And this one's going to start right from the very beginning. So if you're a more advanced student of syntax and you're, coming at this externally, you may want to wait a little bit and pick up some of the stuff later on. If you are interested in syntax more sort of independently, this is want some new exposure to it, this is going to be a great way to start there. I'll also be posting some additional resources, such as Kearney's video series, and so forth. Today's video is mostly going to be focused on some of the general problems that we're going to be thinking about when we think about syntax, what syntax is, and so forth. I do want to have a very brief discussion discussing the sort of structure of my class. Again, this is going to be much more important for folks, at SIU taking my class. Not so much important if you're watching this video out of your interest or for other reasons. So we are going to be approaching the semester via a flipped model, wherein most of the lectures are going to be conducted, or virtually all the lectures will be conducted via video, and then the in-class instruction is going to be done with exercises. And that will also be where the primary evaluation is. And I think this will also give us the flexibility that we need should anything else come up with all of the new COVID variants that are coming out and so forth. So we'll talk more about that in class because, again, lots of other people watch these and I don't think they want to get bogged down in these details. But because of that, throughout the video series, we might see answers to questions that come up in class that I'll try to address on the video as well, because if it comes up in the classroom setting, I think it will also come up for those that are potentially watching independently. So the main questions I think that we're trying to deal with first is, what is syntax? And I think that's a really big question. It's a question that I think even working linguists don't have necessarily a great answer to all the time. Now, if we flipped to a dictionary or an encyclopedia of linguistic terms, it would say something like the scientific study of the structure of the sentence. And there's a lot that we could try to unpack with that understanding. So with that definition, first we have to sort of assume this sort of primacy or fundamental object, which is the sentence. And this is something that we're going to assume throughout this course, that the sentence has this sort of linguistic primacy, this linguistic importance. Now, this is an assumption that may be wrong. And in fact, there are frameworks, or there are linguists out there who don't believe that the sentence is as important as linguists, particularly the generative linguists, believe it is. But there's good reasons to think that the sentence does have a lot of sort of importance in language. It is sort of generally the minimal propositional value, propositional utterance that we can give. And it is, you can have single word utterances and all these other types of things, but those single word utterances tend to carry with them the other elements of the understood elements of a sentence. So there seems to be something sort of fundamental about this sort of packaging of a sentence. That said, sentences occur in discourses, they occur in conversations. So, there might be reasons to say the sentence is part of a larger whole, and it certainly is. Nonetheless, our focus in this class is largely on the sentence. So we have to think about what the fundamental pieces of the sentence are. And this is another area that we're going to start to run into these sort of assumptions and these questions throughout this course. And this is an area that I worry about a lot. So obviously, when we think about like an English sentence, we think about the various word forms that occur within that sentence. But defining words is actually a very, very tricky thing. So there's good reason to think that there's actually not a good, coherent definition that's going to capture what it means to be a word cross-linguistically. Nonetheless, for our purposes, we're going to have to say that what a sentence is, at least certainly to start, is it's the order of words. And their words are structured together, and the way you put them in order has different meanings. Certainly, I think that's, if we look at a language like English, the sentences like the dog bit the boy and the boy bit the dog, they certainly have different meanings, and that meaning is in part related or entirely related to the differences in their order. So sentences, syntax looks at the order of words and their structure with respect to each other. So one of the things we're going to try to analyze within syntax is we're going to try to look at the sort of deeper structures within a syntactic frame. So we can look at pairs of sentences that seem very similar on the surface, but actually have very different syntactic behaviors. And we're going to do this utilizing the scientific method. So the scientific method, in the sort of very basic form, is that we're going to make observations. We're going to provide hypotheses about those observations, and then we will test those hypotheses to form theses and so forth, and test those and so forth. Now, granted, that's a very naive form of the scientific method. Obviously, our initial observations are going to be informed by the sort of general framework that we're working in, the general ideas about language we already have, but it's good enough. It's good enough for us. So we can look at pairs of sentences that look very, very similar to each other and see that they behave quite differently. So we can take a sentence like, Jack and Jill ran up the hill. Great sentence, perfectly grammatical sentence of English. We can also take a sentence like, Jack and Jill ran up the bill. Now, these sentences are virtually identical in their linguistic structure, in their sort of surface order, in their phonology, in everything. They look very, very similar. The key difference is one word, hill versus bill. And these are very, very, phonologically similar words. But they behave differently in different contexts. So I can say something like, from Jack and Jill ran up the hill ran Jack and Jill, where I can sort of shift that sort of focus of that prepositional phrase to the front of the sentence, sort of providing a greater sort of context about where they ran. That's fine. That's grammatical. But I can't do that when I'm talking about them running up the bill. So, up the bill ran Jack and Jill sounds really bad. Unless we're talking, in some sort of weird context where there's a large man named Bill or something. But that's not the meaning we mean. We mean that they had a crazy night out and they spent too much money. So this sort of nearly, idiomatic or verb particle construction, that's what these things are called, where you take a verb and you have this sort of freestanding particle element, up, run up, throw out, throw up, those types of things. They have a different syntactic structure than things like run up, where up is talking about the manner of motion, where it's a prepositional phrase modifying this. And we can't necessarily analyze these these different sentences just looking at their surface order. We want to be able to account for why up the hill ran Jack and Jill is grammatical, but up the bill ran Jack and Jill is ungrammatical. So at a fundamental level, what we're going to be focused on in syntax is our notions of hierarchical structures and fundamentally a notion of constituency. And a constituent is simply just a group of words that function together as a unit. And we'll talk a lot more about what a constituent is. But what makes these two sentences different, what makes up the hill ran Jack and Jill grammatical, is that prepositional phrase, up the hill, is a unit. It's a prepositional phrase. They form a unit together, and we can do different things. We can provide different operations to that unit. But up the bill is not that same type of unit. It has a different sort of fundamental structure. So even though these look almost identical, or not almost, almost identical, even though these two sentences look so similar in their linear order, they actually have a different syntactic structure. So one of the things we're going to want to focus on is how do we explore this hierarchical order, this theory of constituency. And again, we're going to utilize the scientific method. We're going to test, okay, well, if up the hill is a constituent, what types of predictions do we make about that? And we'll continue to do that throughout the semester. So that is sort of the fundamentals of what syntax is. It is looking at the sentence and saying, what are the pieces? How do they group together? How do they function together? And how can we study that scientifically? And at the core, that's all it is. Syntax is a subject that tends to intimidate a lot of people, because we do get into elaborate tree structures. It turns out that what's happening in natural language is very, very complex. We are very, very complex organisms. We have a very, very complex linguistic system. But at the fundamental level, all we are studying is how groups of words group together and what kinds of operations they can do because of that grouping. That's syntax. Spend a lot more time working on that throughout the course of the term. For those of you that watched my spring 20 20 videos, you'll know that I like to end each video with a quote. I will do that again throughout this course as well, because we're still in a pandemic. Yay! No, not yay. Not yay at all. Obviously, we're trying. Things have improved somewhat in various ways over this period. The vaccines are now available and so forth, but we are still, there's still quite a bit of uncertainty. The new variants keep popping up, and I still think there's it is a new uncertain world. So I honestly don't remember if I used this one before. It's been a couple years, but this is from Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. This is Notebook 4, on number 17. Don't act as though you were going to live for 10,000 years. Fate is hanging over your head. While you live, while you can, be a good man. I mean, it's a good reminder that we are, even during these pandemic times, we are, destined, ultimately, all of us to die at some point, for lack of a better term. And the best we can do is just try to be good to each other. So I encourage everyone to do that, and I look forward to working with everyone over the course of this term on this topic. This is true of both those of you that are enrolled at SIU and taking my class, and those of you that are just going to be following along with these videos. I enjoy reading your comments, getting your emails and so forth. So yeah, thank you.